I once thought that if anything could silently destroy a marriage, it wouldn't be infidelity. It would be a credit card statement. That night when I opened the statement on my screen, I froze. Each line was a blade. $3,486. West Elm. $1,245. Tiffany Company. $2,000. Palmer Architecture LLC. All of it was paid from the joint account of the company Brandon and I owned. The man who once held my hand and vowed we would build everything together from nothing. He still came home every night, still kissed my forehead before leaving for work, still called me his number one partner. But I was a financial lawyer. I could read those cold numbers the way others read confessions. And for the first time in my life, I realized the very skills I used to expose financial crimes were leading me back to my own home. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind ran like a machine programmed to uncover the truth, even if that truth pierced straight through me. I sat at the dining table from 11 p.m. until nearly 4 a.m. Every time I tried to stand and go to bed, I saw the line for Palmer Architecture LLC on the statement, and my body felt pinned to the chair. I opened my laptop. Not to spy on my husband, but to investigate an irregular deal, signs of siphoning company assets into personal property. I typed the first search, Palmer Architecture LLC plus Texas. The first page showed a nicely designed website. A blonde woman stood in front of modern architectural drawings with the tagline, "Designing Homes That Breathe Dreams." Chloe Sanders, Principal Architect. I clicked About. Age 29. Graduate of UT Austin, Interior Architecture. Had designed several villas in Highland Park and the new Uptown development. At the bottom of the page was a small line, currently leading the design for a modern home in Uptown Dallas, estimated completion in October. Uptown Dallas? Brandon once said he was making a long-term investment in a project there. But in the company's tax filings, I never saw a single property declared in Uptown. So whose name was on that investment? I pulled up Dallas's public property records. I searched under our company. Under Brandon. Nothing. I switched tactics, searching by the lot description listed on Chloe's site. When the result came up, I nearly dropped my glass of water. The property was listed under Tatum Eleanor Hayes. My name. I read it again to make sure I wasn't imagining. Every detail matched. Tax ID, residential address, transfer date. June 2 years ago, exactly when my aunt passed and left me a handful of small properties. At that time, Brandon handled all the paperwork because I was buried in a major case. I signed where he told me to without a second thought. The house Brandon was secretly building for another woman stood on land I inherited. It was a calculated attempt to steal my property. By 7 a.m. I was at the office. No one else had arrived. I sat in a small conference room, fired up the projector, printed everything I had found, highlighted, marked, grouped. I analyzed it as though preparing a prosecution file. Motive, method, financial trail, legal vulnerabilities. By 8:10, Lauren, my colleague and closest friend, walked in, latte in hand. "God, Tatum, when did you get here? You look like you haven't slept in 3 days." I pointed at the screen. She frowned. "What's this? Palmer Architecture? Are you working on a new case? Not another CO embezzling, right?" "A CO, yes. And my husband." Lauren froze for a few seconds, then set her cup down. "Brandon." I slid the stack of files toward her. She flipped through page by page. When she reached the property map, her eyes widened. "Wait. This house is being built on your land." I nodded. Lauren dropped into a chair, sighing. "Tatum, what do you even want me to say?" "Nothing," I said, eyes still on the screen. "Just help me tighten this file. I want it clean. Bulletproof." "What are you planning to do?" I turned my laptop toward her. "Trace the spending. Follow the construction invoices. Compare with company expenses. And if needed, I'll reach out to the contractors for site photos. I need evidence Brandon is using company assets to build a private house for his mistress, on land titled to his wife." "You're sure you want to go all the way? This isn't divorce anymore. It's fraud, law, and reputation." A beat of silence. Then Lauren pulling out her own laptop. "Then let's start." That night, Brandon came home with a bouquet of peonies, the flowers I loved most, though he rarely remembered. He set them on the dining table like a model husband, leaned down to brush my forehead with a kiss, the scent of a new cologne lingering. Not the kind I had ever chosen for him. "How was your day?" he asked, pouring wine as if nothing were amiss. I glanced up from my laptop, gave a faint smile. "Fine. A little heavy with contract reviews, but nothing major." We had dinner like any successful couple might. Table neatly set, golden light overhead, 2 glasses of red wine side by side. Outside was Dallas at night, skyscrapers glinting. Inside was a man setting the stage and a woman across from him who had already read the entire script. "I've got good news," Brandon said midway through dinner. "Next week I'm meeting an investor from Houston. Might land a consulting deal with a hotel chain expanding in North Texas." "Sounds big." "Very big," he said, his eyes lighting up as though even he believed his own story. "I'll be traveling more the next few weeks, mostly meetings and partner visits. But if it works out, it'll take the company to a whole new level." I lifted my wine glass, tilting it toward the light, watching the deep red ripple against the glass. "So you'll be away again Thursday?" Brandon hesitated, then smiled. "Possibly. Depends how negotiations go." I nodded as though everything he said made sense. But in my mind I flagged it. Thursday meetings, Houston investor. I logged every detail. In the weeks that followed, I observed Brandon with a calmness that was almost frightening. He kept bringing flowers weekly, kept leaving little notes tucked in my coat pocket. "To the most amazing woman I've ever met. Thank you for always standing by me." I didn't throw away a single piece of paper. I kept everything, like holding on to evidence. I needed the full picture when it all came to an end. Brandon always knew how to pick his moments. He bought gifts right after I'd had a grueling week. He cooked dinner on the night I stayed at the office until 8 p.m. He even suggested, "We should take a few days off. You're exhausted." It sounded sweet. But every word from him now felt like malicious code, smooth, polite, but carrying a trap beneath. I started a private folder on my personal laptop. The name, Chronicle_02. Inside were Brandon's emails about projects that required travel, vague PDF contracts he sent me to review with the excuse "you're better with finances," and all the invoices he told me not to worry about. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. Brandon wasn't careless. He calculated everything, keeping transfers under $5,000 at a time to avoid bank alerts. Palmer Architecture invoices were labeled "Project Expansion Consulting Fees." Interior purchases were split across 3 different credit cards, funneled through a shell company under a third party's name, likely a friend of Chloe's. If I hadn't been trained to detect fraud, I might have believed it. But Brandon forgot one thing. I wasn't his wife. I was the woman who once sent a CEO to prison over a single email he mistakenly forwarded to me. One morning while I sipped coffee, Brandon's phone lit up on the table with a notification. Reminder, 10 a.m., meeting with Sanders, Uptown site. That name had burned into my memory after countless nights of research. Brandon walked out of the bedroom, hair still damp, pale blue shirt freshly pressed. "Early meeting?" I asked. "Yeah, with the design team. Someone I met at a conference," he said, glancing at his phone before quickly locking the screen. I smiled. "Hope you pick a style that fits the company." "I'm thinking a blend of modern and traditional," he replied, kissing my forehead before leaving. The only blend at that point was the mix of patience and fury rising inside me. I sent Lauren a copy of the entire Chronicle_02 folder. An hour later she called back. "Do you know this? Chloe Sanders isn't designing the house. She also owns a construction subsidiary. And that company's receiving payments from Brandon under the category Internal Project Coordination. Which means Brandon's paying for both the design and the build, both routed straight into accounts tied to Chloe." "Are you ready?" Lauren asked, as though she knew I'd been waiting for this moment. "It's not about being ready," I answered firmly. "It's already begun. Some truths don't make your heart shatter. They don't make you scream or hurl your phone at the wall. They make you go completely silent, like your brain is processing an explosion your body hasn't caught up to yet." That's how I felt when I saw the name Ethan Sanders listed under dependent on a tax file. A name I'd never once heard from Brandon. Never seen in a single work email. Yet directly tied to the woman spending my husband's money on her dream home. Lauren slid a printed file across the table. Chloe Sanders, 29. Legally married to Ethan Sanders, firefighter, currently stationed in Fort Worth. Rotating shifts, 3 days on, 4 off. Home during the week, gone on weekends. I looked up. And Brandon has been busy every weekend for the past 3 months. Lauren nodded. Exactly. I pulled the tax file closer. Chloe's finances were worse than I'd imagined. 3 credit cards listed as delinquent over 90 days. A rental in Bishop Arts flagged for 3 months of overdue rent. And most damning, Palmer Architecture LC, the company she used to receive Brandon's payments, was down to a single employee, herself. The firm was hemorrhaging money, owing more than $27,000 to interior suppliers, and currently under investigation for a breach of contract with a former contractor. I drew in a long breath. She's not with Brandon, I said. She's living off my money. Lauren nodded. Chloe Sanders is draining cash from your company, your marriage, and her own husband who has no idea. I'd seen women like Chloe before, in high-stakes divorce cases. Outsiders think they're victims, but in reality they're manipulators. Experts at picking the right moment, the right person to cling to, the right way to leech without raising suspicion. I placed my hand on the file, feeling the cold paper under my fingers like sharpened steel. 2 days later, Lauren called me midday, her voice tight with shock and anger. Tatum, you need to see this. On my screen was a business registration document, dated 2 months ago. Company name, Brightridge Solutions LLC. Address, matched a rental office in Addison. Industry, strategic consulting and construction design. Members, Brandon Hayes 60%, Chloe Sanders 20%, and Tatum Hayes 20%. What is this? You're listed as a partner in a company you don't even know exists. How did Brandon get my signature? Lauren pulled up a scanned file. Remember those papers he asked you to sign 2 months ago? Called it a side investment packet? He slipped the business registration into it. You signed every page. Signature matches perfectly. And what are they using my name for? Lauren typed quickly, then pulled up a financial statement. Brightridge secured an $85,000 grant from the state's Women-Owned Business Support Program. What? This loan only gets approved if the business has a female co-owner listed as the primary applicant. Brandon used your name. She paused. And the email that filed the loan? A brand new account, t.hayes.solutions@gmail.com. Registered with Brandon's phone number. They had used my name, my reputation, my legal standing to legitimize a shell company for their affair. And I, the woman who earned a full scholarship in law, who combed through contracts line by line, was coldly deceived by the man I once trusted above all. Lauren gently placed her hand over mine. Do you want me to contact the Federal Financial Fraud Unit? I shook my head. Why not? Because I want to handle this myself. And because I know, it's not time to reveal my hand. They still think I'm in the dark. Lauren understood instantly. She nodded, then passed me another file. I extracted the transaction history from company accounts linked to Brightridge. A lot of payments are going straight to an interior studio named Sandlight, owned personally by Chloe. I flipped through the pages. There it was. Invoices for Italian tiles, Japanese pendant lights, walnut beds from North Carolina, all shipped to one construction site. The lot titled in my name. I smiled. The smile of someone who had already seen the whole chessboard. That morning, Dallas had a light rain. Texas rain. Not pouring, not decisive, but steady and lingering, as if the sky itself were deciding whether to forgive the earth. In the corner of my usual cafe on Elm Street, I settled with a cappuccino, its warmth enough to keep my fingers from going numb. Across from me was Lauren, hair in a high-bun, pale gray trench coat, holding a neatly bound leather folder. We looked at each other. Long enough for me to know she was waiting for me to begin. We have enough evidence. But I don't want this in court. Not yet. You want to handle it yourself? No, I answered, eyes still on my cup. I want them to collapse on their own. And I'll be the first to watch. She smiled, her eyes turning serious. So what do we do next? I opened my bag and pulled out a color printout. The Dream House Design Palmer Architecture flaunted on their website. It was only a demo, but enough to match with their spending records. Lauren flipped page by page. Living room faces west. Glass load-bearing walls. Floors of Italian stone. She raised an eyebrow. What do you see here? I pointed at the bottom corner. A project code that matched an invoice for over $12,000 in materials, paid from Brightridge, the company in my name I never knew I owned. It's not their house, I said. It's a house built with every piece of me. My name, my money, my legal credibility. Lauren smirked. You sure you don't want to quietly pour the wrong concrete so the foundation sinks? I laughed. Thanks. But I've chosen another way. 3 days later, I got an email from Brandon's secondary inbox, the one he used with investors. Subject: groundbreaking ceremony, Brightridge Solutions time. Next Saturday, 11 a.m. Location: Uptown Lot, corner of Lemon and Carlisle. Guests: investors, local press, design partners, some family. I hadn't been mentioned anywhere. No name, no title, no invitation. Even though on paper I was a legal co-owner, the very fraud they'd used to make it official. I forwarded it to Lauren. She replied in less than 3 minutes. This gets better. Source says Brandon's calling it the beginning of a sustainable new chapter between technology and modern architecture. That afternoon, we met in the office conference room. The whiteboard was cluttered with sticky notes, every detail grouped into categories: suspicious financial transactions, personal assets funded by company money, real estate contracts with signs of power of attorney abuse, shell company structures. Lauren held up a document. Lease agreement for apartment 1E at Harwood 34, where Chloe once lived. Brandon was the payee. I frowned. Chloe never listed that apartment in any of her income records. Because it was covered entirely under employee relocation support. And the approving officer of record. Me. Lauren nodded. Forged signature. Perfectly done, if you don't compare it to your old samples. Each layer of betrayal no longer tasted bitter. It became fuel. A strange energy that only comes when you've lost everything, yet have too much to reclaim. That evening I got home before Brandon. I made something simple: pumpkin soup with buttered toast. When he walked in holding a paper bag with flowers, peonies again, I didn't look up. I saw your schedule's clear Saturday, he said gently. Want a spa day or something to relax? I stirred my soup. Saturday's the groundbreaking, isn't it? Brandon froze. How do you know? I looked up, keeping my tone light. Marketing accidentally copied me on the email. Oh, it's nothing big. Just a small media thing. I figured you were busy, didn't want to bother you. You're right. I am busy. He studied me for a long moment, then looked away. Maybe he thought I suspected nothing. Maybe he still believed I was the old Tatum, the wife who handled paperwork without question, who never paid attention to little things, like, who was using her name to borrow $85,000. A few hours later, I opened my laptop and sent Lauren a short message. I'll be at the groundbreaking. But not alone. Prep plan B. And call the one person I think should be there, Ethan Sanders. A minute later, Lauren replied, You're about to make this party unforgettable. There are chess games you don't win in the first 3 moves. You win by letting your opponent think they're ahead, long enough for them to back themselves off the board. I chose a business dinner, elegant, deliberate, entirely coincidental, with the exact people Brandon would never expect me to gather in one room. I called Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, Brandon's parents, on a Tuesday afternoon. George's voice was still gravelly, the tone of a man used to making decisions all his life. Patricia's was soft, measured, every word wrapped in the old Southern formality she carried like a second skin. I'd like to invite you both to dinner, I said slowly, with the right amount of sincerity. I think it's time we sit down together and talk seriously about the future of Brightridge. There are things you should know, sooner rather than later. Silence stretched. Then George spoke. Tatum, we've always trusted you. If you say it's necessary, we'll be there. They had been Brandon's first investors. They had hosted our wedding at their lakefront home in Austin. Never in their lives would they have imagined their only son, the one they believed would inherit and preserve the family name, was gambling it all. I didn't tell Brandon about the dinner. I told him I had an important client engagement at his old favorite restaurant, Del Frisco's Grill in downtown Dallas. Brandon smiled at the mention of the place, kissed my forehead as usual and suspected nothing. I drove to Fire Station 27 one weekday afternoon, carrying a Starbucks bag and a slim folder. Ethan Sanders had no idea who I was when I arrived. But after 3 words of introduction and the first photo I slid across the table, Chloe and Brandon standing together on the construction site, hand brushing hand, his eyes changed instantly. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rough with anger and shock. "Tatum Hayes," I said. "And I think we're both being broken by the same play." I laid the folder in front of him. Statements, invoices, shell company scans, details of the apartment Chloe called her creative workspace, but in truth was the place she and my husband lived as if married. "She still tells me she loves me," Ethan muttered, eyes locked on the pages. "She says if I'm patient she'll wrap up this unfinished project." "Chloe seems very skilled at turning everything into something temporary," I said. "But I think it's time she learned what permanent looks like." I pulled an envelope from my bag. 7 p.m. this weekend. Private dinner at Del Frisco's. Brandon's parents will be there. I'll be there. And if you want, so will you. Ethan looked at me for a long time. His dark brown eyes glimmered with restraint, the kind of patience only a man who had endured too much could carry. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "I want you to witness," I said slowly. "And if you're willing, I want you to speak. In front of the people who should have known sooner." The night of the dinner unfolded exactly as I planned. A private room, candlelight soft but steady, a round table for 8 with only 5 seats filled. Brandon arrived 15 minutes late, carrying a small gift box. "I thought this was some sort of anniversary," he said, setting the box down. "Didn't remember which date, but you seemed different, so I figured I should bring something." I smiled. "In a way, it is an anniversary." When George and Patricia arrived, Brandon looked surprised. But he quickly regained composure, greeting his parents with the dutiful charm of a good son. "It's good to have everyone together," I said, raising my glass. "I think it's time we spoke honestly, before it's too late." Brandon turned to me, confusion flickering in his eyes. And when Ethan walked in without warning, without introduction, he froze. Chloe wasn't there. Because what Ethan carried in his jacket pocket was enough to make her absence the loudest confession of all. At 10:30 the next morning, I walked into the hotel lobby wearing an ivory suit that fit perfectly, hair pulled back in a neat bun, makeup light, enough to pass for an investor or a media sponsor. No one recognized me as Mrs. Hayes, the legal wife, the one left off the guest list of her husband's big day. Lauren walked beside me, clutching a thick black leather-bound file. "Chloe here yet?" I asked quietly. "Walked in with Brandon 5 minutes ago," she whispered, glancing at her phone. "And guess what? They're posing for photos in front of the backdrop with your company logo." I smirked. Perfect. The groundbreaking ceremony was outdoors, beside the cleared lot, banners flying and a 3D model of the first green smart home merging interior design with residential tech on display. An acoustic band played soft jazz as guests sipped mimosas and nibbled orange-glazed waffles. At the edge, I watching Brandon lean in, introducing Chloe to each guest. "This is Chloe Sanders, our strategic design partner. She's the soul of this project." Chloe beamed, sunlight glinting off a new necklace. The exact boutique piece I knew was sold only in Austin. Brandon had once bought me nearly the same design in our second year of marriage. I stepped onto the wooden platform where the MC prepared to invite the company rep to speak. Brandon spotted me. He faltered for half a second, his face twitching before he forced back his polished smile. "Tatum," he muttered, lowering his voice as he approached. "What are you?" I tilted my head, feigning surprise. "Oh, I thought you invited all founding partners and legal co-owners of Brightridge." "I'm here representing myself." Brandon's jaw locked. Chloe turned, her eyes hitting me as if she'd seen a ghost she thought she had buried. I didn't wait for them to respond. I faced the MC, smiling. "Excuse me, I have a few words before Brandon speaks." The MC, flustered but polite, stepped aside. Brandon lifted a hand, ready to cut me off, but Lauren appeared right then, placing a file in my hand. I turned to the guests, my smile soft, but my eyes sharp as a scalpel. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tatum Hayes. I'm here not as Brandon Hayes' wife, but as a co-founder, shareholder, and the legal title holder of this land." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Brandon went pale. Chloe's brows furrowed as panic spread across her face. I raised the file. In my hands are Brightridge Solutions' complete bank statements from the last 6 months. In them you'll find over $45,000 funneled from company accounts into construction materials, furniture, and design fees. $15,000 for architectural consulting from Palmer Architecture LC, a sole proprietorship run by Chloe Sanders. And every single transaction routed into one project, the house being built right here. I tapped the map behind me, the towering model in plain view. The critical detail is this. This lot was legally inherited by me. It does not belong to the company, nor to Brandon Hayes. Any investment poured here is misappropriation and criminally prosecutable. Brandon cleared his throat, forcing a weak laugh. Tatum, maybe we can handle this privately? This is a ceremony. Oh, I know, I said, meeting his gaze. And because it's public, the truth should be too. I turned to Chloe, calm but unyielding. Would you like to explain why your one-person firm received tens of thousands from joint company funds, under my name, while you remain legally married to another man? Chloe pressed her lips, steadying her voice. This is a misunderstanding. I was contracted legally as a design partner. With contracts forged under my signature? I shot back. And with a fake email account in my name applying for a state loan? This time Chloe's eyes flickered. And then, footsteps echoed on the stone path behind me. Ethan Sanders appeared, a thick brown envelope in hand, eyes locked on his wife. Chloe spun around. When their eyes met, her expression shattered. Chloe, Ethan said, voice low and deliberate. I think you have something to say to everyone here. Ethan, it's not what you think. He said nothing. He handed the envelope to Lauren, then turned to me. Messages, photos, emails, wire logs. Including the conversation where Chloe and Brandon discussed getting him out of the house by December at the latest. Patricia Hayes raised her hand to her mouth. George went rigid, gripping his cane tight. Brandon hissed through his teeth, barely audible. Tatum, you... Not me, I said, turning to the silent crowd. I'm the legal owner of this land. The one whose identity was stolen to register a shell company. The one filing charges against your 2 strategic partners for financial fraud, misappropriation of assets, and corporate misconduct. Thank you for listening. And if you ever considered working with Brightridge in the future, I think today you've learned the truth of what it really is. Dozens of eyes bore into us, into me, Brandon, Chloe, and Ethan standing in a broken triangle in broad daylight. The eyes of people who once trusted them. The eyes now watching a mask rip away under the sun. I slipped my phone from my jacket pocket, calmly dialing. Tatum, what are you doing? Brandon stepped back, voice frantic. We can fix this in private. You don't have to. I lifted a hand, cutting him off, switching to speaker. The call connected after 3 rings. Thank you for calling the Texas Small Business Loan Department. Please hold for a representative. Still smiling, I stared at the shimmering model house. A bitter monument to what they thought they could steal forever. Hello, this is Jennifer with Business Grant Support. How may I help you? Hello, Jennifer, I said evenly. This is Tatum Eleanor Hayes, file number Brightridge Solutions, loan application 74852TX. I'm calling to request immediate cancellation of the loan recently approved. Typing clattered faintly on her end. Yes, let me confirm. Yes. An $85,000 loan. Under your name with 2 co-owners. Identity verified from the email address t.hayes.solutions@gmail.com. I did not create that email address, I said. I had no knowledge of this loan. All signatures were forged. And the company was formed by misusing my identity without my consent. I'm so sorry. Would you like us to cancel completely and file a fraud report? Exactly, I replied. Freeze the disbursement immediately. My attorney will submit the legal evidence of forgery within 24 hours. We'll process this right away, Mrs. Hayes. Thank you for reporting so promptly. I ended the call and turned back. Brandon, white as a sheet. Not a drop of blood left in his face. His lips moved soundlessly, his eyes flicking from me to the model house. Now nothing more than hollow plastic and wood, lifeless and absurd. Chloe staggered back. No, You said everything was fine, Brandon. You said the papers were approved, the money would be transferred this week. Where did you want the money sent? I cut in, my voice no longer gentle. To the Sandlight studio under your name, where you secretly shipped more than $30,000 worth of furniture from the company account. Or to the so-called personal credit card for material advances, the one you opened under an internal code linked to my company. Chloe didn't answer. She looked at Ethan like some last instinct. But Ethan didn't look back. He had already turned away, shoulders squared, walking out of the ceremony like a firefighter leaving a blaze he hadn't started. You built that house on other people's trust. On your family's name. On mine. And you thought it would stand. I stepped down from the small stage, each footfall soft but firm on the wood, an unspoken declaration that needed no shouting. Brandon staggered to the house model, bracing himself against the display table like a man clinging to scraps. I'm sorry. It started as a small mistake? I asked, turning to him. And that small mistake grew large enough to shatter everything we built. You didn't betray me, Brandon. You betrayed your own name. George remained rooted in the aisle, his eyes hard as stone. Patricia hadn't moved since the bank call ended. Even the investors who had eagerly shaken Brandon's hand earlier were now slipping their business cards back into their pockets as if they carried dirt. A media assistant nervously cut the background music. Technicians began unplugging microphones. The groundbreaking ended not with applause, but with the heavy silence of a building that had never laid a foundation and had already collapsed from within. I hadn't expected everything to unravel so quickly. But maybe once the needle tears through the fabric, no one bothers mending the rag anymore. Just 1 week after the disastrous ceremony, the Texas Corporate Finance Committee announced an official investigation into Brightridge Solutions for signs of fund misuse and grant abuse. Our office got an email from a legal contact. Tatum, your file triggered a broad review. You did the right thing at the right time. Brandon was summoned urgently by federal financial investigators. They demanded he turn over all spending records, internal transfer contracts, hiring documents, and an explanation for why an $85,000 loan had been withdrawn under his wife's identity without her consent. Within 3 days, Brandon's parents, George and Patricia, announced they were pulling all family capital from the company. I heard through a call Lauren had with their financial advisor. George said it plain, not a dime of family money will patch a hole dug by his son's lack of ethics. Not withdrawal. They updated their will, removing Brandon from all inheritance, including the ancestral home in Austin and his shares in Hayes Company, the construction firm his parents had built. Lauren recounted it with a bittersweet edge. Can you imagine Brandon's face when he signed receipt of that inheritance notice? I knew that look. The look of someone who once held all the power, then watched it slip like sand through his fingers. As for Chloe, her downfall followed quickly. The Texas Board of Architecture launched a professional ethics review after receiving copies of the forged contracts and fraudulent loan records, all of which Lauren and I submitted directly. In the hearing, Chloe tried to claim she'd been pulled in, that the finances were arranged by her partner. But evidence doesn't pity. Especially once they traced how she used a fake email in my name to apply for the state loan, and funneled company money into personal use. Chloe's architecture license was suspended for 5 years. She was barred from practicing in Texas or any state under reciprocal agreements during that period. I learned it from an email sent by the ethics board. In Dallas business pages, the headlines began to appear. From groundbreaking to investigation, Brightridge and the identity abuse scandal, what's happening at Hayes Company? Founder's son cut off, stripped from will, the silent lawsuit of a lawyer, and the lesson of reputation in the age of open funding. I shared none of them. I let them pass like everything else that once came and went. On a Monday morning, I walked into the courthouse like someone finishing the last piece of paperwork after a long journey. I filed for divorce. Brandon didn't contest. He wasn't in a position to. His lawyer remained still, his face locked in a strained neutrality while mine presented. List of marital assets misused. Personal expenses disguised under company name. Business license established with forged identity. And finally, proof Brandon had exploited both my name and finances to sustain his affair. Not once but for nearly a year. The judge was an older woman, silver-haired but sharp-eyed. After 3 hours, she set her glasses down, nodded to both counsels and said, "Mrs. Hayes has demonstrated clear contribution and loss, legal and emotional. The court rules. Full ownership of Brightridge Solutions and the Uptown Dallas property will be awarded to Mrs. Tatum Hayes." For me, it wasn't a victory. It was reclamation. What was mine I would take back. 2 weeks later, I signed a contract selling that lot to a developer of affordable housing. The market price wasn't what it had been when Brandon bought the design. But I didn't care. I had no need for a mansion built on betrayal. I wanted to turn what once symbolized manipulation into a shield against it. And so I founded the Ledger Project, a legal aid and independent investigation fund for women who suspect financial fraud within their marriages. Lauren was the first I asked to join. She walked into the first meeting carrying files on 3 women, a teacher, a nurse, and a small business owner, all with one thing in common: assets tied to their names without their knowledge. "Tatum," she said, her eyes alight. "I think we started at the right time." "We can't fix their past," I replied. "But we can stop their futures from being stolen like mine was." In the first week, I received a handwritten letter. No sender name. Inside, a slip of paper with one line: "I didn't know that signature was forged. I'm sorry I lacked the courage to stop." I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, along with the old documents, and locked it. One early autumn afternoon, I lingered in the hallway of my new office, looking out at the small park across the street. A woman was on the phone near the water fountain. Her face was etched with worry. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I knew that face. I had once been her. When she hung up, her eyes landed on the sign of my office. She hesitated, then walked up the steps. I stepped out of the room. "Hello," I said. "Do you need help?" She wavered. "I'm not sure this is the right place." "You suspect someone put assets in both your names without your consent?" She nodded. I opened the door and invited her in. "Then you've come to the right place." Alone on the 6th-floor balcony, I leaned against the railing, holding a warm cup of mint tea. Early winter nights in Dallas were cold but not biting, the kind of chill that reminded you the season had changed and maybe you should too. Below, strings of golden lights pulsed through the streets like veins, keeping a sleepless city alive. Far off, the skyline cut the gray sky with blocks of glass, reflecting yellow shards of light, like the night I discovered everything. Beside me lay a piece of paper, slightly yellowed, its edges crinkled from being folded too many times. The very first statement. $247 for a dinner at a Japanese restaurant. I had once trembled holding it. Lost sleep over it. Wondered if I was being paranoid. Wondered if I was destroying a marriage over one receipt. Now I knew, it wasn't a receipt. It was a signal. A sign that everything I trusted was cracking. Not because it wasn't strong enough, but because I was the only one holding it up. I brushed my finger along the paper's edge, then walked into the office and slid it into the shredder by the wall. A soft whir filled the room. Line by line, the familiar marks, the words, the numbers, the restaurant name, the credit card digits, were cut into strips, falling into the bin like pieces of an old chapter no longer worth keeping. Lauren walked in carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. "Destroying evidence?" she teased, setting one on my desk. "Not evidence," I said, taking the other. "Just an old reminder. I don't need it anymore." A young woman entered next, her brown hair tied low, a folder clutched in her arms. "Miss Tatum, the 3 o'clock appointment is here. Case of suspected property transfer during separation." "She seems scared," the girl added. "But she brought every document. I think you should take this one yourself." I turned to my desk. Orderly, quiet, free of anything tied to Brandon Hayes. I had once worked in a different office, answering his calls while drafting loan documents for him. I had once believed silent sacrifice was the truest form of love. Now I understood. Sometimes sacrifice becomes complicity in lies. I stepped into the hallway, past small framed photos lining the wall. Snapshots of workshops on how to read financial statements, pictures of women around a table, eyes bright as they uncovered truths that had been buried too well. I wasn't teaching them revenge. I was teaching them to read, to understand, to protect. The very things no one ever taught me. Now I was teaching them. Each story doesn't end with truth exposed. It continues with how we choose to rise from the wreckage. I chose independence. I chose to protect others with the same scars that once cut me. What about you? If you were in my place, would you walk away in silence, or stand up to reclaim justice and carve a new path forward? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below because every word shared might become someone else's strength. And if you want to keep following stories of family, love, trust, and betrayal, told with raw honesty, don't forget to subscribe. There will be more journeys to come, where every ending doesn't close a tragedy, but opens a new way of seeing life.